What's up guys, this is Alan again, back with another video. And today we're going to check out this video. It's called We Asked 6 Bartenders What's the Most Overrated Bourbon. And since I worked in a bourbon bar, I figured that this is a great article for me to share some of my knowledge. So let's go check this out. Okay. 2024. This is actually pretty important to state the date because the bourbon industry has changed a lot in the past few years, and a lot of the names might be shared from something that existed in the past and might be made differently or somewhere else. So it's not like wine where it's like vintage or anything like that, because it's depending on when the bourbon was made. It could be made differently at a different location. The laws surrounding bourbon it's very just, got the ABCs of bourbon. Has to be American made, has to be charred barrels, has to be made 51% corn, has to be distilled at no higher than 160 proof, entering a barrel at no higher than 125. So there are distinct laws on that part of it, but how the bourbons get labeled gets kind of tricky. So I have a feeling that this has related to what that is, because depending on when the bourbon is made, it could be either good or overrated. So let's go check this out. So this is written at Vine Pair. So I'm going to put the link if you guys want to check it out. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing. This is just going to be a quick video to see what these overrated bourbons are. There are many reasons why a bourbon fan may find a brand overrated. They may scoff at the hype generated by limited allocations. They may not understand the zealous enthusiasm of rabid enthusiasts. They may feel the price point doesn't jibe with the quality of the juice, which is the distillate. A special technique used to create a brand may strike them as gimmicky, or they may just simply have given expression of the taste and decided meh. Yeah, so let's go through that. This is actually a very good point. Limited allocations. Allocations means that it's just not available for everyone. There's special rules that you have to oblige by before you can even get it. For example, you have to buy this amount of cases of this vodka before you're even allowed to buy this bourbon, because this is limited, so we can't just sell it to anyone. So at this point, having money itself is not an issue. It is an issue, but money alone is not enough. You have to buy. So this is why you are forced to, you might see different bars that might feature a lot of like Grey Goose or Captain Morgan, and then which is like, oh, that's kind of like very common stuff you can get at Bevmo, but you think at a place that has this expensive bourbon or Japanese whiskey at the bar wouldn't have this mainstream stuff on the menu. If you ever wonder that, it's because they're forced to sell this amount of like Captain Morgan. They just have around, so in order to push that product, they have to feature it on their menu. So yeah, for the limited allocations, this is like supply and demand. It's not that the bourbon is great, it's just that it's hard to get. They may not understand the zealous enthusiasm of rabid enthusiasts. Yeah, there are some bourbons where I'm like, this is okay. I don't know why there's this huge following. So this is what that is. Like, some people just gravitate towards certain products. For example, I made a video on the Tesla Cybertruck. Lots of car enthusiasts would be like, no, this car falls apart. There's no reason, it doesn't justify having this 6-figure price point. But people pay for it. 3,000 people are happy no matter how bad it's been falling apart. They feel the price point doesn't jibe with the quality of the juice. So I have a few friends who are blind tasters, so they are part of the tasting panel. They review a lot of spirits. It can range from vodka, tequila, mezcal, different types of rum, gins, and then of course bourbons. So they don't know what the brand is. They just get little numbers and then they write the score, blah, blah, blah. And many times these brands that they don't never heard of, or maybe they have heard of, score extremely high. And some of these brands that everybody orders, they on the blind taste test, they score very low. So as a bartender, I don't go for price or how rare something is. I go for taste. But at the same time, if somebody wants to buy something, I'm not going to stop them from buying it. A special technique used to create the brand may strike them as gimmicky. Yeah. There's one that was like, you're trying to like mimic it being aged longer than it. So it's trying to use like science. Another one is like, we age our whiskey in like climate controlled areas that mimic the humidity of like Scotland or things like that. I'm saying, cool, that's cool. But how does it taste at the end? Bartenders usually have strong feelings about whether or not a bourbon is worth its salts, or at least its hype. Yeah, I would say that very high level bartenders are going to most likely disagree with what the general public thinks is premium and not premium. Same thing with a lot of wines. I think a lot of wines are overpriced. I mean, it goes through everything. I think a lot of tequilas are overpriced. I find that there are a lot of really good tequilas that you can get at very good prices. It's the same with bourbons as well. You just gotta, if you know the right bartenders to ask, you can find some really great bourbons for reasonable prices. They know what they like and they know what they don't like, and they may not be as bashful about sharing. Yeah, the last place I worked at, the Michelin Star places, like there's people trust my expertise, and we sell things that are pretty expensive. Like we had this tequila that I hate. We charge about like $80-$90 for a pour, and I almost like, I cannot recommend it, but there's this one regular that always orders it, so I'm like, go ahead, like if you want to order it. But I personally, I mean, we never say that though. I'm not gonna be like, don't order it, because if she wants to buy the freaking expensive overpriced tequila, then that's all on her. It makes her happy. But if anyone asks for my opinion, I would be like, it's not for my taste. With that in mind, we asked 6 bartenders their opinions on the most overrated bourbon brands on the market. Of course, the below are just personal preference. This is inherently a good thing. The moment bourbon stops being subjective, it's the same moment it ceases to be interesting. Yeah, of course. This is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm not going to stop somebody from enjoying something. If they want to buy it, then I'm not going to be like judgmental. I mean, yeah, I'll be judgmental internally, but I'm not going to be like, don't order that. That thing is crap. You're paying way too much. Like, in the end, it's all about the guest experience. If it makes them happy, that's what our job is as bartenders. The most overrated bourbon, according to bartenders. Pappy Van Winkle, Blanton's, Basil Hayden, W. Okay, I agree with some of this list, and let's go break this down. Pappy Van Winkle. Honestly, this is a little tough because I think a lot of brands fall in this category. However, it has to be the Pappy line. It's nothing special, just a separate label. Basically, in no world is it worth the markup, let alone the hassle of securing the allocation. Get rid of Pappy forever. I like Buffalo Trace just fine. Okay, let's look at these two statements. Actually, let's go over what Pappy is. Why is Pappy so expensive? Pappy used to be one of the first wheated bourbons, which means that right after corn, the next most common grain in the mash is going to be wheat. And what wheated bourbons are great at is through extensive aging. Another popular wheated bourbon is Maker's Mark. In fact, the original master distiller of Maker's Mark actually learned from the original Pappy Van Winkle on how to make wheated bourbons. So they do carry a very significant part in history, in that the original distillery that made Pappy Van Winkle produced a very high quality juice. The last place I worked at, we did have Pappy that was made in that original location, and it is amazing. So the controversy of what is going on here is that it got bought out, and then the original distillery closed, and the original juice is no longer, doesn't exist anymore. What happens is, let's go to Kate Gershwin, her reference to, I like Buffalo Trace. The distillery producing Pappy is just fine. So right now, the juice for Pappy's is actually identical to Buffalo Trace. And this is where the controversy is. It's like, why this isn't the same Pappy that was, let me see when they stopped making it. This isn't the same juice. It's the same name, but everything got consolidated. So the juice that's being pumped out is Buffalo Trace, before it goes into aging. But of course, when you're cooking with, a great dish, where you get the source is very important. Like, you can grab Gulf shrimp and versus like a Santa Barbara spot prawn, and you could cook it the same way. It's not going to come out the same. And the argument is that now everything comes from Buffalo Trace, so it's like, what's the point? Like, you're just cooking it differently. So the original source, the original juice, is no longer as high quality. Not to say that Buffalo Trace is bad. I like Buffalo Trace, and I think it's a very great bourbon to be used for cocktails. But I do agree that it doesn't produce a quality sipping bourbon that is age-worthy like the juice that came from the Stitzel-Weller distillery. Yeah, it might be cooked the same way being as the aging process, but the source, the original ingredients, is just not as spectacular as it once was. Okay, Blanton's. So what Blanton's is one of the first single cask whiskeys. I don't know. I wouldn't say that this is overrated. I mean, it's expensive, but it's not as overpriced as the other ones. But let's see. Like, for me, it's just like an okay single cask bourbon. It is just like the name of Pappy. The significance of Pappy is that the name really did mean a lot at one point. Blanton's significance is that it was the first single barrel bourbon available in the market, and which was big at the time because they used to blend a lot of, they still do, they blended a lot of different barrels to produce a consistent flavor profile that's associated with that brand. So what they did contribute is that practice of releasing these single cask or single barrel productions. But yes, outside of that, it doesn't really produce, especially when you compare the products, other options of single cask bourbons, it just doesn't hold up against the other brands of the single cask. And again, just like Pappy, the juice comes from the Buffalo Trace distillery. And oh yeah, this is another thing I forgot. Also, I found out that a certain amount of Blanton's appeal comes purely from the desire to collect the stoppers. Valiant pursuit, although I would venture that. So the Blanton's cap refers to this cap right here on the top. There's actually the different caps actually plays an animation. If you put it like, it also spells, there's a different letter on the bottom that says Blanton's. And if you actually line it up, it's like an animation of the horse running. And this goes back to those, those gimmicks. So people try to buy it so that they can collect until it spells out Blanton's. Basil Hayden. Basil Hayden is part of the Jim Beam small batch, one of the 4 small batch bourbons by Jim Beam. They're different variations. So it's not like Buffalo Trace where it's the same juice that goes into different brands. Each of the mash bills of these 4 are actually different, and they're produced differently. Basil Hayden is the high rye bourbon that's produced for this. So as we mentioned earlier with Buffalo Trace and Pappy Van Winkle, those are wheated bourbons, which means that after corn being the primary ingredient, the next ingredient is going to be wheat. With Basil Hayden, it's going to be corn on the top and then rye on the second, which is why it's called high rye. This usually produces a more spicier style of bourbon because of the rye content. Let's read what these bartenders say about this, and then I'll give you my opinion on this. And I also agree that this is overrated bourbon. I'm going to say it loud and unapologetically. Basil Hayden is the most overrated bourbon on the market, period. It's not. I do think it's overrated, but I would not say that it's the most overrated. Having 8 available expressions, all at 80 proof, is a travesty to bourbon and whiskey in general. I actually agree with this, and I'll say it, but I'll add something else to this as well. I understand that they're trying to hook the casual drinker, but at 40% ABV with every expression, it's not about getting drunk off of high proof. It's about having so much character resulting from a high proof they're bottled at. Basil Hayden is a diet bourbon. At $35 price point, it's even more of a head scratcher that people waste their money on a watered down product when there is Buffalo Trace. Again, Buffalo Trace is not a bad bourbon. It's a great cocktail bourbon. It's great for cocktails. And I've worked in many different bars where Buffalo Trace is the well, and it's a fantastic well. But Buffalo Trace is at 45% alcohol, which is at 90 ABV. So having a small batch bourbon at 80, which is considered low, because usually small batch means I can sip it neat. You know, it should have some heat, some spice. But at 80 proof, it's just so low. And why would you have 8 different versions and not one? Let's go back to Blanton's. Why not have one that's at cask strength, a single cask or something like that? Why are they all 80? So let's go back to why the 40% thing is very significant. 40% is very light. As I mentioned, this is a high rye bourbon. When you have a high rye bourbon, it's usually associated with spice. So the fact that is at a watered down 80 proof, you don't get that spice. It just feels like you don't get that heat. When I think of rye whiskey or a high rye bourbon, I want that spice. I want that heat. I want like flavor. So having it's kind of like almost an oxymoron. Like, why would you have your high rye bourbon at such a low proof? It kind of defeats the purpose why is it even high rye to begin with if it's just going to be diluted so much? It's not enough to taste that heat that's associated with a high rye bourbon. Okay, Weller. This, of course, also goes back to the Buffalo Trace juice. Although I'm a fan of the Weller lineup, I'll consider this an overrated purchase. If you can find it priced as intended, you won't be disappointed. Unfortunately, for the common whiskey hunter, you're going to pay significantly over. So Weller does have a lot of selections, and it does get kind of pricey. And again, it shares the same juice as Buffalo Trace. It's just cooked differently, different barrels and different selections. Like, I don't disagree that it's not a bad product, but it's still overrated because of the fact that it's just kind of expensive for something that's just like comes from the same juice as Buffalo Trace. Angel's Envy. So this is one more blank. As if we have Angel's Envy, I'm going to lose it. That's all the explanation it gets. I wouldn't say it's overrated, but it also has a significance in the bourbon industry because it's one of the first ones that finishes at a different barrel than so it's not aged completely in American charred oak. Each of the different types of Angel Envies are going to be finished in some other type of barrel, like a port wine, rum cask that are a cognac rum cask. So things like that, which is what made it unique. Just like Blanton's, it was one of the first, if not the first bourbon to pioneer this practice, but now everyone's doing it, and it's like it kind of just fell behind. So anyways, that was the article. Let me know what your favorite bourbons are, whether or not you agree that these are overrated, overpriced, if there are bourbons that you would recommend. Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys on the next one.